Hello, Satan here once again with a somewhat short but serious video. Like many others, I recently finished The Last of Us Part 2, and after ample time to collect my thoughts, I decided to throw in my 2 cents. Now, I don't know what you've heard, but this game was damn good, and I just don't get why so many people simply decide that giving it a chance wasn't an option. Aside from maybe the Bioshock series, which will likely be the topic of my next video, The Last of Us is probably one of the only games I would consider to be a 10 out of 10. So, needless to say, I was really skeptical that this game would live up to my expectations. However, 2 hours into the game, I realized something. Regardless of my opinion, I was going to let Naughty Dog tell their story before I decided to judge it. And since I have no friends to discuss this game with, or friends, period, I want to talk about it. I will try to avoid spoilers for obvious reasons, but I might vaguely reference certain plot elements, so here's a light spoiler warning just in case you haven't played the game yet. But if you haven't, I would recommend you go do that. Play the game for yourself and form your own opinions. That said, here we go. The Last of Us Part 2 had a bit of a rocky release, most notably due to spoilers leaking online as well as the virus that's going on. Luckily, I don't use much social media, so I was able to avoid them. But when the actual game did come out, I noticed that it was met with review bombing and an average user score of 2? Which, no. It was actually kind of sad, considering everyone who had reviewed it by this point had actually failed to finish the game, considering it had been out for about 10 hours, and the game takes about 25 hours to finish. So, you do the math. I guess people reached a certain section, got mad, and quit the game? So, to those people, I say, I feel sorry for you, for being so weak. Rarely does a game deserve scores this low, especially not one with as much talent and love behind it as this one. Sorry for this tangent, but as an aspiring game developer myself, I would kill in order to work at a company such as Naughty Dog, considering everything they've done in recent history is a goddamn work of art, including this game. Seriously, it's gorgeous. I mean, it took me like 30 minutes just to walk through an early forest section that had zero combat. Of course, the performances are also phenomenal for pretty much every character. Obviously, Troy Baker and Ashley Johnson were amazing, but so was Laura Bailey. Hell, even some of the random enemies sounded great.
Chris has been called in. Greg went out to Capitol Hill. What the fuck? We're under attack!
Yeah, you better believe I picked up on Jeremy Lay's voice lines a couple of times throughout my run. The combat isn't perfect, but it's sure as hell stronger than other games I've played recently, and definitely more refined than the first game. You can do a lot more and use some pretty fun and interesting strategies to kill or sneak past enemies. Other than the fact that I love the new dodge mechanic, there's not a whole lot I could say about it. It's solid. My only real gripe is that you can't repair melee weapons like the first game, so I shed a tear every time I have to part with a beloved machete. Now, the story is where things get a little tricky. It's not your typical narrative, and it definitely takes some unexpected turns. I took many breaks between chapters, simply so I could process what had just happened and what I thought was gonna happen. And while I see how some people would hate the constantly building tension, I thought it worked pretty well. The first game ends with Joel making a very selfish decision that likely dooms the rest of humanity and effectively making him the villain. But the world isn't black and white. It's more of a gray area, consisting of people making selfish decisions that would obviously benefit themselves. It may not be the most profound story, and it didn't make me very sympathetic toward most of the people you set out to kill, but it does work on a certain level, and the game includes some of those moments that hit so hard during the first game. So if you completed it and still hated it, that's fine, I get it. It's a divisive one to be sure. But most players really only have issue with a certain character. Now, I never thought I'd need to state the obvious here, which is that there is zero reason anyone should ever receive death threats for a fictional character. And this has proven that my already low standard of humanity was clearly set a little too high. Did I love the character she portrayed? Not really. But Laura Bailey's performance was great. There were one or two parts that I really didn't care for. When I first finished a certain chapter, and was then forced to switch control to my current least favorite character, I was slightly annoyed. However, after some time of dying on purpose at every possible opportunity because I knew it was the closest form of retribution I would get in that moment, I started to cool off. It still didn't change the fact that I would much rather Ellie be the one to come out of this whole thing unscathed, but I understood where Abby was coming from. I liked where things were headed. Until you get back to the cliffhanger that you left off previously and are forced to do something many of us did not want to do. And I hated every moment that I was both simultaneously in control and yet had none over the situation. Does Ellie make the best decisions? I can't say, as I'm not really sure. But what she endures for revenge and how she comes to realize what that has cost did get me to very briefly consider the various themes presented in the game, before immediately deciding that it was far more fun to hunt down and kill others who. Oh, wait, context. Whatever. I think it's clear by this point that many who are looking forward to this game feel let down. But the direction it took was never really in our control, and I respect the enormous risk the creators took with this project. Story-wise, the outcome may not have been the one we all wanted. There were certain characters I wish had survived, and some plot details I didn't necessarily care for. But anyone who was paying attention knew that after a certain point, it was only gonna end one of two ways, and I'll take the ending we got over the alternative. So, is it as good as the first game overall? I would say not. If part 1 was a 10, then this one is more like a solid 9. The sequel didn't necessarily need to happen, as I always felt the first game wrapped up everything in a pretty satisfying way, but I'm glad they made it, because even if it was a story I didn't ask for, in retrospect it was one I needed to experience. Of course, that's just my take. So if you're one of the 3 to 5 unfortunate souls who stumbled upon this video, let me know your take in the comments. Did you like it? Hate it? Apparently those are the only two options. If you made it this far, thank you for watching. Now excuse me while I go practice the admittedly awesome in-game guitar mechanic and finish my second playthrough for that sweet platinum trophy.